right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I wanted to extend a warm welcome to not just our community supporters, which of course I know most of you are elected officials who support us so much and all the way, and also our visitors who have come from areas on the Eastern Seaboard and from California. Welcome to San Angelo. We are so glad that you are all here. For those who are new to our community, or this is a first-time visit, most of us, those who are new, have projects underway in San Angelo and in Tom Green County already. So they are known to our community, or at least they know us. And I think one of the things that's always such a strong takeaway is that the comments have been coming in all morning of what a vibrant, focused, and determined community this is. And we are, and I think we all know we are. And it's always a wonderful opportunity to have a chance to tell the San Angelo story of who we are. A city of 100,000 people, 3 hours from Austin, 4 hours from DFW, 4 hours from San Antonio. And we're really that linkage point between the extreme economic vibrancy of what they call the Golden Triangle, mainly the I-35 corridor, and far west Texas, where we see so much ag, food, fuel, and fiber produced. And it's always a privilege to know that I have the support of so many in this room, because really that's the wind in our sails. I think economic development is truly a team and a community effort. It is not just a singular effort of the one. It is a collective effort of the many. As a regional hub, we continue to grow, and I think that growth is going to continue going in a much faster trajectory over the next 10 years. We're seeing about a 2% growth in our city right now, that's population, but we're also seeing massive amounts of investment coming in that doesn't necessarily make San Angelo live on a daily basis, because it would probably not be appropriate to do so, but a lot of equity companies are focused on San Angelo. And the reason is a lot of the primary markets in Texas, that would be, let's say, Houston and Dallas, and even the secondary markets, let's call that Waco, for example, a lot of that equity is looking at tertiary markets, like a San Angelo or a Wichita Falls. And those sizes of cities. We're a unique city in that we are not necessarily near a major metropolitan area, near a major MSA. So we don't necessarily get that yield effect from those larger cities. So that puts us in a very unique position to where we can't rely on that natural organic economic yield effect to impact our community. Let's say, for example, like the Woodlands or a Tomball, Texas, which, yes, they have very robust economic development focuses and programs, but they're also naturally getting an effect from Houston. Fast facts. I'd like to talk a little bit about that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of just give some fast facts and some nuggets of information, especially to those of our community here who are new, so they get a little bit more of an idea of what San Angelo is. They already know what the impact is and what the welcoming is like, but let's talk about a couple of fast facts. Currently, we have 85 manufacturers. These are companies that fall under the NAICS code, and not to get too detailed, that stands for North American Industrial Classification Code. These are companies that are power companies and manufacturers and service providers. But a lot of people don't know, especially our newcomers, that we're home to several very large companies, large presences of those 85 manufacturers and growing. A couple of them are WW-AFCO. WW-AFCO Steel, that is a very large Oklahoma City-based company with their largest campus in the United States right here in San Angelo. They have 3. If you've never seen their work, you should go out to Las Vegas and take a look at the Sphere. The Sphere was actually built in pieces in San Angelo, Texas, and shipped out to Clark County. So if anyone's ever been to the Sphere, you're sitting in a little piece of San Angelo. Well, 21,000 tons. I'd say that's more than just little. Johnson & Johnson. Since 1964, we have had one of their premier suture manufacturing plants here in San Angelo. So 80% of the free world's sutures, surgical sutures, are made in San Angelo. And if you've ever, and for our newcomers, if ever they get to drive by the facility, you won't see much and you'll wonder, why is that? Well, it's an underground facility that was built for strategic reasons during the Cold War. So 80% market share, that's a big share coming out of San Angelo. They brag that they can get surgical sutures from here to Tokyo in 36 hours, which they do very efficiently and have done so since 1964. Wendland Manufacturing, that's a company that we're all very familiar with because they have one of the most iconic little buildings right on the Concho River near downtown. They manufacture RP-1 tanks for NASA and SpaceX. They also recently manufactured a whole slew of water and hydration containment tanks for Skybox. Bimeda Biologicals. This is a company based out of Ireland, and they are a leading global manufacturer of vaccines for animals. Goodyear Proving Grounds. Their North American test facility is located just north of San Angelo on 11 square miles. And that is a premier testing ground, and if anybody has ever visited there and had the opportunity to ride in their cars and vehicles with them, it is definitely something that I would recommend you do. I think Laramie Stroud and I got to, what did we ride? Was it a Corvette? Yeah, and you're looking all cool when you get out of it. The guy who was driving was a former F1 driver from Japan, and I have pictures of Laramie and I walking out of one of these machines. We were a little unstable for about 20 minutes, but it's definitely worth the tour. And it's fascinating to see the work that they do out there, the engineering and testing. To the point where we actually asked one of the engineers, what's it like driving these Corvettes at 110 miles an hour? And he said, it's really fun. But the problem is when you're testing tires, you go forward 10 feet and stop, and you write down your notes. Then you go forward 10 feet and stop, and you write down your notes. It gets a little bit long in the tooth doing that. Tachyon Airway Services. Not only, as we heard, are we in the solar power and wind power development sector, with actual generation, but Tachyon Airway Services, they employ approximately 500 people, and they are based here in San Angelo. This is their national headquarters, and they are a wind farm maintenance and management company. Very proud to have that relationship. These are the tower climbers, and if anybody's ever met a tower climber, they're kind of like surfer dudes, and they're not afraid of heights. So if you ever have a chance to meet one, talk to them. They're fascinating people. Be cautious though when they invite you to come up into one of the towers on belay. If you're afraid of heights, don't think about it. Lone Star Beef. This is one of the largest protein and beef processors in the United States, located right here. Blue Cross, of course, those of us who understand the healthcare industry understand Blue Cross. Of course, we have Principal Sloan, which is a company that we've been very proud of. They started off in 2007 as a company called Agilite, and the Vincent brothers had a great idea that they would make LED components in a market that was becoming, pretty full pretty fast. And they took a whack at it and have now captured 70% global market share of LED internal components for signage. So they do some of their examples of Chick-fil-A Canada, Shell Oil. They do all of that signage that we all see. A newcomer to San Angelo that we were really pleased to announce a couple of years ago is a company called Rosenberger, which I have to confess, at the time when we were recruiting them, we didn't really know much about them, but it took a very quick jaunt on their website to realize they're one of the largest private companies in Germany. They're kind of the General Electric of Germany. They landed a manufacturing plant here that creates coaxial cables and cabling for data centers. So obviously they've been really interested in the kind of stuff we've been doing. And then a lot of our manufacturing base is still based on technologically driven, but really your more core types of hands-on steel on the ground. And this is our steel sector. In fact, ALNC Steel, we have representatives from that company here today, located up on FM 2105, a wonderful steel company. manufacturing products, mainly for the O&G sector, oil and gas sector. So when you look at the San Angelo panoply of industrial sectors, it's easy to look at power generation and those components that support power generation. But we also have a very robust agricultural sector. $815 million a year is generated from Tom Green County alone from the ag sector. And so this again works closely with all of the natural resources that we have here. And I think it was really neat to hear that there's an interplay between the renewable sector and the ag sector. And I think agrivoltaics, is that the word we heard? That's a cool, I like that word. That's a good word, agrivoltaics. But clearly, one of the things that we speak about as a Chamber of Commerce, every 2 years, we participate in the, I'd call it the advocacy effort at the state legislature of what we're doing in the Concho Valley and why it makes a difference and why legislative support and why supporting our elected officials at the state level is so important. And that is to inform our other legislators throughout the state of what kind of bills they're considering and how they impact the Concho Valley and impact our families and our businesses, with everything from school initiatives to taxation to clearing and doing some blocking and tackling for our investments in the ag sector, the renewable sector, the oil and gas sector, and then the manufacturing sector. And so these things, it's very important to have events like this where we have representatives from the state so they can hear our story. And in more than just what is it? What do they give you at State Affairs? 3 minutes? Yeah, 3 minutes is all you get. So I have a hard time keeping things compressed into 3 minutes. For those I know it's true. It's really true. Tom, I know. That's all they give you is 3 minutes. Unless you get engaged. Then you can talk longer. I like to share our story. But one of the components of our economic story and our manufacturing story is the advancement of the technology sector. The technology sector is unavoidable, but sometimes it's kind of hard to find. Now, in certain areas of Texas, it's easy to find. You can see, the different names of these companies plastered on the sides of buildings, even though many of their workforce are actually remote, whether they're traveling or whether they're more of the work from home. That phenomenon has always existed, but it became very common during the COVID situation where remote working, what some of us old-timers used to call telecommuting, if those who remember that term. I don't see any hands, so anyway, there's one. Oh, yes, of course. Thank you very much. It's now remote working. So what we did in collaboration with Gabe Menchaca and Janice Teeter and several others in the community did a survey, which then evolved into the Concho Valley Technology Alliance. And that was to try to figure out how many people in the tech sector live and work in San Angelo. And we came up with approximately 3,500 to 4,000. And that was 3 years ago. So it's probably grown since then. I'm seeing some nods. So I'm obviously got pretty close to accurate. But you don't just go knock on doors and say, do you work for a technology company based out of Seattle? You have to let them come to you and they tell the story. And it's really amazing to see that, because what that helped do was create some real wind and horsepower behind the repurposing of an old legacy business here in San Angelo called Sitel. Sitel is a contact center that had a very well-known and rather iconic building on Loop 306. And that building was actually purchased by VGI Technologies and Snyder Technologies, and now it is known affectionately as the Technology Tower, which we thought in economic development would be great because we've got a 5-story building, fully redone. I think all they kept was the frame. Absolutely did a gorgeous job on this building. And we thought this would be a really neat incubator. And that dream lasted only about 90 days because we got the phone call from the developer telling us that the building was 100% leased. So that's a good problem to have. So it shows that the absorption rate is continuing to increase as the city continues to grow. And I think that the technology sector, bolstered by data centers, is going to continue to grow. It's really not. It's really inevitable that it will continue to grow. Now that leads us to another component of our economic story, and that is it's not just private equity and manufacturers and technology companies, but it's also our partners, ASU, Angelo State University, Howard College, and SAISD. And those three particular partners, we've got a lot more work to do because as things continue to grow, we're going to see more and more increased collaboration between industry and those institutes of higher education. We already see that, and we've already participated in a number of programs through the Society of Manufacturing Engineers, SME, with their PRIME program, which is a collaboration between the Society of Manufacturing Engineers, which is a nationally recognized, highly respected engineering organization out of Washington, D.C. and Dearborn, Michigan, and Howard College and SAISD, which is a training lab and hands-on training lab for high school students hosted at Howard College, and this is partially 50% paid for by the Society of Manufacturing Engineers Education Foundation. So we really want to make sure that none of us miss opportunities to find collaborative efforts between education and manufacturing. And you see this a lot in Europe. Rosenberger, the company that I just mentioned, based out of Friedolfing, Germany, one of the reasons they ended up moving a factory from Lancaster, Pennsylvania to San Angelo was the fact that we were able to demonstrate that relationship between higher education and the manufacturing sector here in San Angelo, which to them, and I'm sure some of those who've done work in the manufacturing or the services sector in Europe or with European companies, that's very common. It is not foreign to them. It's not a novelty. That's something that they actually rely upon, to the point where Rosenberger, when they opened their facility on Tractor Trail Drive, very good Texas-sounding name, which the Europeans think is pretty neat, they actually created a special evening time schedule for students at SAISD, Howard College, and ASU that may want to come and work a couple of hours in the evening on their manufacturing floor. And so these are the ways that we're building our skilled labor pool internally. We find, just anecdotally and through polling, that many of the students here in San Angelo at SAISD and the surrounding ISDs, many of which are supported in part through pilot programs and taxation as derivatives of our solar and wind projects, because they're out in the countryside. Many of these students prefer to stay in San Angelo if they can, which we found to be fascinating and yet delightful at the same time. It's very nice to know that we've got young people who, yes, they may want to go out and see the world, and we certainly don't want them to not do that. But we've noticed an increasing volume of youngsters who ask our office all the time, what are some job opportunities that we can look at that keep us in San Angelo? And so I think that because of the nature of the feel of the city, the quality of the city, it really actually, and maybe not even on purpose, it serves as kind of a platform or an attractant to our young people, which we found to be an instrument that we can build upon more as we continue to grow. I don't think we're going to see as much of our labor shed in the form of students departing San Angelo, but that's why we do what we do. We want to create as many opportunities as possible. One of the challenges that we have, which many cities in the United States actually do have, and that is a small available labor force. Right now, our unemployment rate is under 3%. Which is a good problem to have. And whenever I've spoken to actual professional economists, they'll state that, because you want some context. Well, what is 2.9% unemployment actually? What does that mean? Sounds like a good problem, and it is. In a healthy economy, 6% unemployment is considered normalized. That's considered kind of a healthy number. So we're under that by half. And so that creates some pressure on us to figure out collectively as a community, how do we increase our industrial base, our tax base, and our opportunity base with a very small labor shed? And that is why we have explored opportunities with things like data centers and renewable power and of course, battery energy storage. So these are ways that we can increase our technological footprint going into the future, but not necessarily have to rely on a very large labor pool. And partly that's just because that labor pool is very skilled. Just ask the guys over at ALNC sitting right over there. Skilled steel workers are becoming fewer and fewer, and those skills really can't be matched with dedicated technology. Robotics can help, but robotics, as I've learned by talking with a lot of our steel manufacturers here in the Concho Valley, it's more of an assist, maybe even sometimes described as a crutch, because having that eye, that artist's eye for that type of work is really not a skill that can be very easily taught. It has to be learned and absorbed over years and years of working with those materials. And that's part of our shared vision, is finding ways that we can continue to grow our economy and understand what the community can bring to us as well. And that's why I love forums like this, because we get to hear from everybody, and we derive a lot of our future casting as to what we're going to approach and what kinds of corporate recruitment and business retention and expansion efforts we're going to deploy because of the feedback that we get from our community and from our manufacturing base and our technology base. We have found over the years that the reliance upon incentives, economic development incentives, has gone down substantially. And we find that to be kind of a curious phenomenon. When asking these companies why, and most of them will tell us that industry as a whole in this country from about 1990 to about 2010 became highly reliant upon economic incentives. That is public-private partnership dollars from the taxpayers into these companies. And although there are some constructive uses of it, the spirit of why those dollars were initially earmarked for investment by the community into economic development, the spirit was kind of they were pushing the envelope a little bit too much. And what happened was, even if the communities made a deployment of tax dollars over a number of years or tax abatements, generally the companies did well. But what a lot of them found is that they used that as the deciding factor for where they went, as opposed to truly understanding the depth of what the community can offer them, not just presently, but in the future, in the next 10 to 20 years. And so that's why a lot of our discussions with companies like Skybox, Emergent, and Apex and ALNC as a business retention and expansion program, recipient, steel company, and many others. What we want to find out is what are they going to need in 10 years? We know what they all need now, but what are they going to need in 10 years? And how does that look? And how do we bring those proper resources to bear, as opposed to just, a temporary tax abatement, which can help it as kind of a Band-Aid, but it isn't really going to promote the full-length growth of a company. Many of our manufacturers, energy companies, and industrial services companies have been here for years, if not decades. And that's one of the things that we really are proud of, and that we speak to when we're recruiting new industry to San Angelo, and that is our community has a way of really attracting and supporting companies for a long-term durability. And so that's something that economic developers are always concerned about, is we don't want a fad to land in our community and then go away in 2 or 3 or 5 or 6 years. We want them to stay, and we want them to flourish. And that's where the community effort comes in, on informing us and informing our constituents at the county and at the city and at the institutes of higher learning as to what kinds of tools these companies are going to need going forward. So what I thought I'd do just for a minute, if I have any time, I have 5 minutes, and I'm going to answer a few questions if there are any. Yeah. One would expect, and that's a really great point. One would expect that you'd see upward pressure on wages as the labor shed continues to compress. And what we see is kind of that disparity between the two. I don't know what the answer is because it's very industry specific. But I think that as we start to see technology increase to where more jobs and certain types of positions are given greater efficiency through AI and those types of office management type deployments of software and technology, we're going to see even greater pressure on. I listened to a podcast last night on the hands-on aspect of industry, and they talked about your plumbers, your high voltage electricians, and when I say plumbers, I mean residential, but I also mean plumbers for regional type projects. And I think that over time, and then probably in the next 3 years, we're going to continue to see upward pressure on those salaries, because I think that labor shed is going to continue to compress to the point where it's inevitable that those positions, we've seen this in the logistics sector with long-haul, over-the-road truck drivers, where in some cases they're making double what they did 10 years ago, and it's only continuing to increase as those regulations are layered upon those driver positions. So the days of just jumping into a truck saying, "Yeah, I know how to run this thing. I'll get this stuff to Montana tomorrow morning." Those days are gone. Those drivers like airline pilots, and they are very tightly and very strictly regulated. So I think that we're going to continue to see quite substantial upward pressure on salaries and also benefits as well. Yes, ma'am. I didn't plant this question, but thank you very much. Yes, one of the things that we do look at, and we bring this to our community partners at the county and the city, and discuss it when we're looking at companies that we want to put a heavy effort into attracting, is what are their wages. And we've had opportunities to recruit companies that were food processors that were $11.56 an hour jobs, and they needed 500 people. And even though that could be considered, let's say you land them, you can consider that an economic win. What are we really building? Is that really the kind of career path that we really want to promote in our area? And then how do you find those people if in theory that was something that we all wanted as a community? You're going to be pulling people from other industries. And so, yes, examining what those wages are is something that we look at very carefully. And I have one more in the back. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
We do, and that's something that I certainly think that our organizations should collaborate. I think when you're talking about workforce development, even from the young ages vectoring into industry, you can't over communicate, and I think that that's one of the things that makes a positive impact, not just on projects like that, but it also gives us that feedstock of people who need to know about those kinds of projects. So I'll be taking your cards soon. Well, thank you very much.